laughing because I have one of her posters in my basement. So she told me to tell you that I got in a water skiing accident a couple days ago, but that's actually a lie. Somewhere between sitting and standing, something went wrong with my knee. So excuse me if I'm a little bent over today. I am deeply honored and grateful to be included in this community event with such esteemed company. I have worked for Northampton Area School District since 1999, but I was a teacher long before that start date. My parents, they're over there, both science teachers, tried to talk me out of becoming a teacher because the lifestyle of a teacher is hard on a family and on a person. Being an educator is more challenging now than when I started teaching. Teachers have become targets for repressed anger and frustration and for political sabotage. But most of us refuse to define ourselves as victims. Some of us have allowed the hate speech and the predatory policy making to transform us into activists. Because activism in our communities is all about educating others and improving our relationship with others so that we might affect change as a result. And in order to affect change, one must choose a side. I've taught Elie Wiesel's novel Night for many years now. And one of my favorite Elie Wiesel quotes, pieces of advice, is one in which he advises us to take sides because neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. I am here today because of the Learn, Listen, Lead event, which Sherry just told you a little bit about, and I define that event as an educational experience. Setting up an educational experience is 2 parts art and 1 part science. To effect change through education, one must first establish the need to know something new with one's audience. Often, doing so means exposing an uncomfortable truth, that we don't know everything, or a personal shortcoming, or perhaps a bias we didn't realize that we had. Next, a teacher must establish a relationship with her audience, because her word must be regarded as her bond. To do this, one must be clear and credible, and one must remember to ask more questions than one answers. Because a true teacher's goal is to show the students how to take ownership of their own education. And the educational experience a teacher designs must appeal to both the heart and the mind. I love the part of that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where Tula's mother describes the role, as she sees it, of a traditional Greek husband. He is the head of the family, she says, making all the important decisions, whereas her role, the wife's role, is the one who controls the husband's neck, inspiring his decisions. And that's what teaching's like. It's both parts. Leaning into a strong emotion is what helps us remember something important. And learning how to inspire the neck to turn is an art. What art needs to do is inspire creativity. It needs to inspire curiosity, and that can only happen if the subject matter is both accessible and complex, and Holocaust history is exactly both of those things. The Learn, Listen, Lead conference came about because of 2 inciting incidences that established a need and engaged my curiosity. The first incident involved a stoning. I was teaching on a team at Northampton Middle School, and we were working on writing a philosophy document we called the Culture of Excellence. We wanted to articulate our teaching philosophies to students and parents so that our routines and requirements and our disciplinary approach made sense. We had tested one of the policies at the end of one of the days, a mini lesson in which we examined the role of language and how language choices in our everyday conversations and how words connected to emotions, and sometimes that led to preconceptions about others, which at times become hurtful. You know the lesson. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can always hurt me. After work, I drove over a bridge into a neighboring community to stop at the food store there. As I neared the parking lot, I saw a group of boys close in age to the 8th graders with which I was working, and one or two of the boys were in front of this old man who was thin and bent over a walker, and the other 3 were behind him. The boys were throwing stones from their pockets and from the gutter at this old man, who, despite them, continued to push this walker ahead, taking one achingly slow step at a time as if the boys were not there. The boys were laughing, jeering, and just joking around. Now, I had a choice. The teacher in me was ready to jump all over those kids, call the police, and give the man a ride to wherever he was going. But the cowardly wuss in me thought about the advice to be wary of interfering with other people's children, especially in a public place, and being labeled, that stranger danger person. And I share these stories with my students each year, and I ask them to consider what should have been done. Because vulnerability is the only bridge by which we build those connections between teachers and students and communities and other communities. And it was a test for me that I failed. I laid on the horn, which distracted the boys for a few seconds, but then I drove away, confused and shaken. And I regret that. The second inciting incident involved Marcel Ginty and Jeanette Eichelmall and Dr. Peter Pettit. I had heard of Muhlenberg College's Youth and Prejudice Reduction Conference, but the middle school event day that they had once a year was always in October. And most districts have some sort of policy about how long you have to give them notice before you take their students out. It's usually a couple of months. And so getting a group of new students ready to go on a field trip in a month was just not feasible at the time. But I was ecstatic, super grateful, when Marcel agreed to come into my classroom in his spring semester and share his survival story as the students finished their study of the Diary of Anne Frank. And Marcel's warm personality and his story of becoming a hidden child turned the neck and the head. After he spoke, as we ate kosher lasagna and salad, he told me about the Youth and Prejudice Conference and how Jeanette would be offering the program in the spring for the very first time that following year. And I begged him for Jeanette's contact information. You can ask her, I email her a lot. So, I didn't want my stone throwers to miss this opportunity to be inspired, to be changed by you. For 10 years and for almost 2,000 students, we brought 2,000 students to Muhlenberg just from my school. Their program inspired students to connect. Their program inspired students to connect a really complicated time period in history with the real people who lived it. It was accessible complexity, heart and mind, and the need to know more triggered, all wrapped up in one. Our school population began to outgrow Muhlenberg's facilities, and I entered into negotiations with Dr. Pettit, who at the time was acting as an interim director for the Y&P conference. And I asked him about creating the satellite campus. And then Marcy Lightwood stepped in, and she took time to share her advice and her expertise with me as an organizer of the event. And I cannot tell you how much time Sherry Spark has put in with me over the years. She is a treasure. The 8th grade staff at Northampton Middle School jumped into becoming Holocaust educators for a day and embraced our guest speakers with open hearts. Our Concrete Foundation, that's the name of a grant organization in my district, they gave me a small grant to help hire a theater group from Philadelphia to perform the Diary of Anne Frank for our students. And then so many people over the years have volunteered their time and efforts to come in and be speakers so that we could make those small groups and make those connections. And I know that those connections are working. I'll give you 2 little stories and then I'm done. So the first is about Leah. So at the beginning of the school year, I was on my way to lunch. It was an in-service, so lunch was at like 10:30, I think. Nothing was open. So I was sitting in my car waiting for something to open, and Leah's mom, it calls out to me from the street. And I got out of the car to talk with her, and she rushed over to tell me that she was so grateful that we did this Learn, Listen, and Lead event at the end of the year because her daughter came home from it and retold every second of the 6.5-hour program in an hour and a half to her mom, and then repeated the whole thing for her grandfather later that evening. So in one household, 3 generations connected over that one day, which is pretty awesome. And then another example of how your storytelling connects our communities together. One of the lunch ladies, her name's Betty. I had Betty's daughter about 10 years ago. Betty stopped me as I was going through the cafeteria and cleaning up from the event, and she told me this incredible story about her family who had escaped Nazi Germany and ended up in the Northampton area trying to blend in. And she hadn't ever actually told anybody at the school about that connection. So this time period really affects both communities, many communities, in different ways. On behalf of all of the teachers at Northampton and teachers all over the Lehigh Valley who sacrifice and showcase their vulnerabilities and their activism, I want to thank you. Thank you for your support by showing up. Thank you for your behind-the-scenes support by helping us connect. And thank you very much for honoring our efforts this year.